said earlier, this morning we're going to be talking about fear. And the title of my sermon is Finding Courage in the Face of Fear. And what's interesting is I actually wrote and prepared this sermon months ago. And it's like I had it all packed up in my preaching bag when I come in to preach this sermon until there decided to be ice on Afton Mountain, and there was a big pile up, and all the roads were shut down, and we had to cancel church that morning. So this is actually the sermon that was supposed to be preached, I guess, back in November. But it's funny how God sometimes can work things out. Because as I was reading over this sermon this past week, it's like I got to thinking that we can much greater relate to fear this morning than we could just a few months ago back in November. Because see, back in November when I first wrote this sermon, we weren't going through an impeachment trial for a president. We weren't having to deal with the fears of this great thing that's called the coronavirus. And we didn't have all this stuff going on in the news. It almost seems like every day there's some new great catastrophe that is happening. There's some new fear that is taking place. And it's like I mentioned to Elizabeth there a couple weeks ago that I said it almost seems like our society, our culture is now driven by fear. We see that our media is driven by fear. Movies and TV shows is driven by fear. Our politics is driven by fear. And it's like I just want to tell us this morning that it doesn't have to be like that. It's like most of us that if you've had the privilege of either raising a child, or if you've ever babysit kids, or if you've ever been around kids, you have probably experienced our children's dependence on us to face their fears when it comes to maybe having a nightmare or comes to having a thunderstorm outside. Kids are afraid of thunderstorms. And it's like kids, they'll wake up, they'll scream, they'll jump out of bed, they'll run down a hall, and it's like our kids will jump into bed with us. And it's like our kids will jump into our bed because what they need at that moment is somebody to simply be with. They just need somebody to just give them some love and give them some safety. And it's like now, like our hugging them and it's our comforting them doesn't stop the fact that there's still a raging storm outside. It doesn't stop the fact that they just had a bad dream or a bad nightmare. But it does change how they view or how they face that raging storm that is outside. See, because our kids will fall asleep in our arms even though that storm is still raging outside. That's like the fear that they had alone. That's like suddenly they no longer have, simply because we are holding them now. We are with them now. We as parents help our children face their fears with love and with comfort. And this is exactly what God does for us. This is what God does for all of us when we face our own fears and it's our own insecurities, even as adults. As they turn with me to the book of Psalms, chapter 27, and if you're one of the Bibles in the pews, it'll be on page 438. But Psalms chapter 27 is a psalm about fear. It's a psalm that's about finding courage in the face of fear. Psalm 27, and so we'll be reading verses 1 through 3. Psalm 27, verses 1 through 3. This is David talking, and it's like David says that the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked came against me to eat up my flesh, I say, my enemies and foes, they all stumbled and fell. Though an army may encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war may rise against me, in this I will remain confident. Everyone in this room this morning, every single one of us has experienced fear. We are all afraid of something. Some people are afraid of snakes, some afraid of spiders, some afraid of bees. To this day, I'm going to let you in on a little private side of me. To this day, I am still a little uneasy when it comes to the dark. I don't like being in the dark. Now, the funny thing is, that's in order to sleep, it has to be perfectly dark. I can only sleep when it's dark. So that when I'm sleeping, dark is good. But if I'm awake, dark is very, very bad. Now, typically the things that we're afraid of as a kid, we are no longer afraid of as an adult. That's not many adults would admit to still being afraid of thunderstorms, or not many adults would admit to being afraid of the dark, or so on and so on. But it's even as an adult, the truth is we still have fears. It's like instead of storms, instead of a literal thunderstorm outside, now as an adult, we are afraid of things such as our personal inadequacies. Maybe we're afraid of failing to measure up to other people's expectations. Suddenly, as an adult, we start to fear our bank accounts, or it's our lack of a bank account. That's like we fear when life seems uncertain. We get so afraid as an adult, like when we can't see how something is going to play out. We often, as adults, fear the future. As the older we get, oftentimes we even start to fear death, simply because we start seeing it creeping closer and closer. Now, King David, who is the author of Psalm 27, understood fear. King David understood fear probably like no other mortal human has ever faced fear. King David understood the uncertainties of life. After all, by the time David was a teenager, he had already killed a bear with his bare hands. He had already killed a lion with his bare hands. And of course, by the time he was a young teenager, he had killed a literal giant with a slingshot. So it's safe to say that David knew how to face fear. It was like in Psalm 27, David gives us a glimpse into where and how he draws his strength. He tells us where he gets this fearless attitude from. And it's like the overall arching theme of Psalm chapter 27 is drawing strength from God. That's Psalm 27 in a nutshell, drawing strength from God. And so King David talks about this in a lot of other psalms, and it's like a lot of his other writings. David often says that my strength comes from the Lord. He is constantly saying that his strength comes from the Lord. That is what he told King Saul back when he was going to face the giant Goliath. David says, my strength comes from the Lord. But in verse 1 of Psalms chapter 27, David goes into detail about how he draws his strength, or how he gets this courage from the Lord. He just doesn't say, oh yeah, I draw my strength from the Lord, but David actually gives us some examples. David gives us two different examples in verse 1 of how he draws his strength. David says, first of all, that the Lord is his light. That's like the second, He says that the Lord is his salvation. So let's look at these two things for a second. Let's look at light. Light is referred to a lot in both the Old and the New Testament. We see this concept of light. We see this illustration of light throughout both the Old and the New Testament books. Now, the main purpose of light is to expose darkness or to eliminate darkness. And so what I think is really neat, that if you study science, you will learn that there actually is not an actual thing called dark. Darkness really does not exist. Darkness is just simply the lack of light. Darkness does not exist. It's just the lack of light. And so Jesus says multiple times that he is the light of the world. It is actually one of the 7 I Ams of Jesus. Jesus gave us 7 character traits of himself. Jesus says that I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the true vine. I am the door. I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And it's one day I would love to go through a 7-week series on the 7 I Ams of Jesus. But Jesus tells us that he is now the light of the world. But see, Jesus also calls us as his followers, as a Christian, that we are to be both salt and what in this world? We are to be light in this world also. We are to be light in this dark and this broken world. We too are to help eliminate darkness from this world. And so when I think about what David is saying here, that the Lord is his light, and it's then Jesus declaring that he is the light of the world, the only thing that the only thing that pops into my head is that I can't help but think of going hunting. See, because I love to go hunting, and I love to be in the woods. And sometimes we like to go hunting way up in the mountains where nobody else goes. And it's I'm talking about the kind of mountains where you drive for a mile off of a paved road. You're on some dirt path, and it's you drive for a mile and you park the truck, and then you walk another 35, 45 minutes. You walk another mile up into the woods once you've already driven off the road. This is the kind of mountains that I love to go hunting in. But see, there's a lot of things up in the mountains that you don't see down in the city. And it's especially when it's dark. I have personally walked up on bears in the dark. I have walked up on wild dogs in the dark. And I even had a bobcat scream at me in the dark one morning. And the interesting thing is, the bear and the bobcat was the same morning. That was literally probably 3 minutes apart. But see, here's the funny thing though. It's the funny thing was, I was okay. I wasn't scared. Do you know why I wasn't scared? Well, first of all, it wasn't because I had a loaded gun. I was not scared simply because I had a flashlight. See, that simple little flashlight eliminated the dark for me. That flashlight exposed what was lurking out there in them dark mountains. Even though I don't like the dark as an adult, I'm okay as long as I have a flashlight. I feel safer with a flashlight in the woods than I do with a gun. I don't know. My mind's twisted. But that is what David is saying here. That's what David is trying to tell us, that this is what God is like. And that's what Jesus is saying that he is like. Jesus says that he is the light of the world. He says that because the Lord cuts through the darkness for us. Jesus exposes to us the dangers that are out there lurking, giving us light. That's like, with that light, He brings us hope. And that's like He brings us safety in the darkness. Now, the world will still be dark. Storms will still rage. But because of Jesus, we now have light. We can have safety. That's like David doesn't stop there. David also says that the Lord is His salvation. Jesus is not only our light, but He is also our salvation. That's like salvation simply means to be delivered from something. That's like typically it means to be delivered from something bad or something that is something that is evil. David is saying that the Lord is His light. It's like the Lord is His deliverer. His deliverer. That's like in David's life. David had to be delivered from bears. He had to be delivered from lions. He had to be delivered from literal 10-foot tall giants. David had to be delivered from invading armies. He had to be delivered from women. He also had to be delivered from jealous sons that was trying to steal his throne. But as most of all, David had to be delivered from his own self-destructive tendencies. Because see, David had the world handed to him, and it's like he almost threw it away for the lust of a woman. Not that a woman is bad, but he got caught up in the lust of a woman that he should not have been messing with. David's downfall was not women, but it was his immoral lust over women. And that's like the sad thing is that if David was alive today, our world, our culture today would say that David was cool. They would say that David had swag. They would say that David had game. But see, that swag that he had turned into adultery, which turned into lies, which turned into cover-ups. It's like it eventually turned into an actual murder. It kind of sounds like some of our Facebook friends post, don't it? Some of our friends almost seems like they live lives like that. But it's through all of this, God still chose to bless David, and as David still became the greatest king that like the nation of Israel ever had. Jesus Himself comes from the line and the lineage of David. There's the same blood that runs through David ran through the veins of Jesus. And it's like all of this is possible because God is a God of salvation. Our God is a God of salvation. God was what seemed to be always having to deliver David out of something. And it's like the neat thing is, it's like the happy thing this morning is that God still does the same for us this morning through His Son, Jesus Christ. Even though we may not have to face a literal 10-foot tall giant or a bear or a lion, see, we still will have to face figurative giants. We will still have to face the consequences of poor decisions that we have made. We may have to face a divorce. We may have to face rebellious children. We may have to face financial woes. We may have to face death. We may have to face sickness. We may have to face something like cancer. And in fact, the list goes on and on and on and on. This world can so often seem so dark, and this world can so often seem like the storm is constantly raging outside. But as long as we keep Christ as our light and as our salvation, we will make it through this world. We can make it through this dark world. Because see, when the world gets dark, all we have to do is to simply ask Jesus to turn his flashlight on. We just have to ask him to turn on his flashlight. Just like when you get stuck in this life, just simply ask Jesus to deliver you. Jesus is to be our light. Jesus is to be our salvation. He's to be our deliverer, not the things of this world. See, because the world will tell us that all this other stuff will save us. All this other stuff like fame, fortune, money, lust, all this stuff will save us. This here's what the world says, but the Bible tells us that it is only Jesus that is the He's the only one that can deliver us. Jesus is to be our light. That's like our salvation. That's like, so if you're stuck in the dark this morning, that's like I urge you to turn it over to Christ. That's like if you need to be delivered from something other, please just turn it over to Christ. Start letting him be the source of your life. Start letting him be the source of your salvation. Let us pray.